Continuing on with the High Seas Heroes and Day 1 deck list, we also have Gravy Bones. This one feels the most difficult for me to solve for a couple of reasons. Number one is the ratio of allies that you want to play, and number two is the actual deck construction and what your endgame win cons look like. Previous illusionists have very easy win cons that are pretty quick to determine. You look at something like Mirror Guy and it's very clear how the play pattern wins you the game. Something like Gravy, while not being an illusionist, feels right at home with the class. And it does feel a little bit more difficult to narrow down the end game of what you want. So for the build today, we are just starting with the core and then thinking about allies that we could play somewhere in your 60. So when we go through the equipments, I think a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. We're obviously playing the compass, and this lets us just chain allies from the yard. We have dead threads. This very well could be Tunic. I have noticed that there are some turns where it is way more efficient for me not to be putting stuff in grave just to turn on the chess piece. But if you are rolling hot and you are converting very well, this can very easily activate once per turn. I think time will tell if you want to play Tunic over dead threads. The hook is very clearly the winner in my opinion. This lets you actually give an on hit to your allies. Gold is very important in Gravy specifically because it lets you not only fuel a ally to the graveyard to play, but also can very easily turn on the second half of the text as well. I think that gold is very, very important, and giving allies on hits presents a very interesting fork that a lot of previous illusionists did not have. The closest thing would be Dromai. Having something like Hyloria is a nightmare because not only do you need to keep cards to clear it, you also need to stop the on hit. So if you're able to play someone like Chum, have it come in on a breakpoint, threaten a gold, while your opponent also needs to find a way to keep 6 damage to clear it, I think this is a very strong slam dunk. The boots, I think overall, are the weakest part of this deck. I've even tried out Time Skippers. Mage Masters just lets you convert a lot of allies in the end game, or as early as turn 1, depending on how your deck wants to roll. This is just a way to cheat an action point essentially, but I do think that these are like maybe one of the weakest slots available. Pirate Hat is also, I think, serviceable for what you want to do. You could end up playing something like Providence just to filter out a non-block. I was playing Providence up until a couple days ago, but this one I guess can kind of filter out. It does almost the same thing as Providence, but it puts the ally into the grave, which is I think inherently way better than filtering it. For our main deck, I really tried to trim as much of the fat as I could. I still don't exactly know if this is the right core of the list because there are a lot of blues that feel like they were designed specifically for Gravy. When it comes to deck building for like Marlin and Puffin, I skim over a lot of the pirate blues because they don't feel very applicable. I don't exactly know at what point in development they decided that it was going to be an all pirate set, not only as a class, but all 3 of the heroes. So I can only speculate. But it really does feel like all of these blues are really intended for Gravy, and it makes it very difficult for me to actually trim out everything here. But the main idea with the blues for this list is that we need to convert, because if we're going to play a huge ally, right, with like 7 health, and our opponent's going to spend their entire turn to clear it, what are we going to do with our follow-up turn? If our follow-up turn is use 4 cards to play another one and pass, I think we're going to lose. And I think that if our opponent decides that they want to start ignoring these and attacking us directly, we need good blocking cards that also can help us race them, right? Because once you have this on the board, you're able to race very, very quickly. So we are trying to accommodate for all that, in addition to also need to fill the graveyard, right? So we have all of these cards that are going to give effects to our ally attacks. These are really important because they put a fork on our opponent. If you attack for 11 and it's going to kill their arsenal, that's almost as good, in my opinion, as Mirror Guy CNC, which is the same reason why we're playing Pummel in the list. I think that you can win on the same game plan as Enigma, where you can stick a threat, play a disruptive card, push the on hit. I mean, specifically something like Pummel, right? Like you can imagine if you're going to set up Chum, CNC Pummel them, they may not have any way to clear it, and then you can snowball on the next turn if they're unable to clear it, if your follow-up cards are good blues with Go Again. This will maybe feel right at home, but that's how we're treating the blue slots at least. We have some good utility. We have Call the Grave and Chart the High Seas. These just let us fill our graveyard. Diamond Amulet lets us convert our graveyard out and swing out. I think that this card maybe could go. I think maybe I'm a little bit too partial to it because it was shown really early in the spoiler season before we saw that there's a whole cycle of them, and maybe this one isn't that good. But I do like this in certain slower matchups, something like Time Snap Potion as well. Like you just need a way to convert all the allies to actually pushing the end game out. Give No Quarter is so self-explanatory. It's Dark Ritual with a multi-cast on a card. It's insane. Golden Tipple, 2 copies only because it blocks 2. This lets us fill our graveyard, turn on the text for gravy. It's pretty solid. And then we have all the your ally attacks get something crazy, right? The Vasti is really good because it lets you convert your actual board state out, but these ones are really good because they're disruptive, either destroying the hand or the arsenal. Tip the Barkeep lets you also convert out all of your ally attacks. This is the biggest thing here, is being able to either chain a bunch of allies or to be able to attack with all of them. And then Sunken Treasure is just more gold generation that acts as graveyard hate. And then when we get to the inventory, we have the allies that I think are maybe worth exploring. Enka is a weird one to me. They have errated it, so it doesn't remove a card during your opponent's draw phase at the end of their turn. But I do think it may still be worth playing just because it is like a decently statted card. But I think with the rules change, maybe this one gets subbed in for a different ally. But the ones that feel very apparently strong to me are obviously Whaler, Sawbones, and Chum. These ones feel very strong for what they do, right? Chum feels like the most insane one. It was one of the first ones they spoiled. Getting near ALS on a card is very powerful, especially when not only does it do that, but it also fuels your graveyard for your follow-up turn, right? Like your opponent is forced to waste their whole turn on this, depending on the hero that they're playing. But then you also put your Watery Grave card into the graveyard for your turn. Now the downside is you can play this and then draw no Watery Grave cards, and then your opponent doesn't get punished by it, but its 0 attack for 4 is really insane when compared to what the other ones do. Chowder feels strong to me, but only contextually, right? Like having any of these that have 0 cost attacks I think is really good because you're able to punish your opponent if they decide that they don't want to interact with your board, block from hand, and go crazy value on the turn cycle by getting to block, like 12 and then sending 3, right? Like that puts you at 15, which is pretty good, right? So that obviously seems good. And then the other thing too with the allies is I think you want ones that can convert very well when your opponent is ignoring your board, right? Because you may not always have Rum or some of these blue cards that give it go again. So one problem that Gravy has is that your opponent can just say, I am not going to ever clear your allies, have fun finding a way to swing with all of the ones that you're resolving, right? Because you're forced to play them to some degree because they're just stuck in your hand or your grave. And then let's say you have 3 on the table and you don't have Rum, you can't actually use all 3 in a turn. So you're really constricted on action points. So these ones that have tap effects, like Chowder that just adds +1 every single turn it's out, can actually be really powerful if you would prefer to swing with a different ally. Oyston's like a little weird, but I think that it's a very solid card into either matches that are going to have trouble clearing it by requiring an entire turn for a 0 cost ally, or into aggro decks that just don't want to interact with this. Would specifically be like non-ninja aggro decks, right? Because they could clear really easily, but just being able to have a decent effect and then also refund yourself the gold after, I think is very good. Whaler feels really self-explanatory for very obvious reasons to me. I mean, it attacks for 11 and has health for 7, which in certain slow matchups, some decks actually cannot really clear it without specifically a red attack. You think about something like Jarl. Jarl cannot kill this unless if he draws a red attack. The sledge only goes to 6, right? So this is going to be really powerful in some of the slower matchups. And then we're playing Pummel, like I said. I think that this honestly could end up being a main board card just as part of your game plan, right? Like this just lets you present a fork to your opponent where you are attacking with a disruptive attack with a very strong ally on the board and then clearing maybe the only way that they could answer your board state. And then AB3. And so we go down to the maybe. There's some other cards I've thought about. I mean, the maybe board can be much bigger. I just like to always keep them a little bit cleaner just to say what's on my mind currently. The flexes are interesting to me either to convert a ally into 4 block during your opponent's turn or converting the blues very defensively. Like I said, the Mage Master boots are pretty mid a lot of the times, and so maybe just having better blocking access is more important for the deck. We have Red Saltwater. It's a very powerful effect, but when you have the chance to not have it online, that's a very high premium for a red slot, right? I would want my reds to basically always be online, which when we look at our reds here, that seems like it's the case. They're usually relevant. This may not always be entirely relevant. Murray is interesting. I think that this can kind of act as a shimmers into certain slow matchups where you're able to passively accrue value, or into matchups where they want to ignore the allies. But the main problem for me is that the health stat is just a little too weak for me. 3 is very easily cleared by basically any deck that you would want to play this into. And Scuba is really cool to me. It turns itself into a hammer, and then it has some like weird mirror tech, but that's as far as it goes in my opinion. I think having to pay for the attack makes it a little bit weaker if it's not going to be really like cleanly on curve. And then also the effect is kind of whatever to me. It seems like the deck is going to make gold just fine, and so I don't really know if you need exactly the extra effect, but it does get points for being so cute. So those are my initial thoughts on Gravy. Obviously, let me know what you've been doing, because I think that this hero is going to take a while to solve. I don't think anyone's going to have a breakout deck in Nats. This is going to take a while. This is probably going to be something like Dromai, where the hero exists for maybe like 6 months or something, and then we finally start to solve the deck list. But let me know what you've been up to. Until next time, thank you for watching.